So for quite a while now, every time I've come into the living room, I've been welcomed by a fantastic light that's come through the living room window, and this has been casting Venetian blind shadows against the wall that the sofa's on. Now, this has been accompanied by a golden color, and it's been beautiful. Every time I come in, I just say to myself, I wish I was able to replicate this at any time of the day. So I took it upon myself to actually do that and set a scene up where I could actually replicate this whenever I wanted. And the following scene is the final result of that. And then after that, then we're going to do a breakdown of exactly how I achieved it. Welcome back, guys. It's Byron Phillips from byronphillipsmedia.com. Thank you for sticking around. We're going to do a breakdown of how I created that scene. Now, it's comprising of a few components. Obviously, we've got the lighting, we've got how I set everything up, we got the camera. I've used one or two diffusions on that, and then we're going to be talking about the actual focus pull-in. And then after that, then we'll have a quick look at how I color graded this so that you've got an idea of the things that I've done to tweak the image. So we'll start with the lighting. The first thing that I've done, so every morning when I come in, I was actually measuring the temperature of the color, and I was doing this using an app on the phone whereby it's a light meter app, but it also allows you to measure the white balance using a gray card. So I'd done that for one or two mornings, and that was coming around between 27 to 3100. So I stuck at 3100 Kelvin for the color temperature of the actual light itself that was being shone against the wall, or that was falling on the wall, I'll say. Then I had to work out what was the contrast ratio between the light that was hitting the wall, that was the main light that was being shone through the window, and then you got the hard shadows, well, not the hard shadows, but the fall off where you got the window, well, got the curtain, and then the rest of the wall. So what was the stops difference between that, so I could find out the contrast ratio. And I used my light meter as I always do, and I was getting 2 stops difference. So that told me that that was the right contrast ratio to use. So whatever I was able to set the main exposure for the window, or the light that was shining against the wall, I had to make sure that the shadow area was at least 2 stops under to try and replicate that look. So we'll go about talking about the lighting now, because I knew what color temperature I needed to set or I needed to achieve, and I knew the contrast ratio, so it was just about trying to replicate that. Now, in previous videos, I've used my main key light with a snoot against the mirror to actually cast shadows against the wall. I say cast shadows, but cast light with shadow effects. I'm rambling, sorry. Now, the trouble that I run into this time is that I had 2 lights that I needed to use, and the main key light was positioned over there, and it was using the snoot. The sofa was moved over, and the mirror was placed against that wall. Now the problem was is that because it's a thin door mirror, it was casting, it was shining a very thin light against the wall. And even though I could get the brightness up, I wasn't getting the shape that I needed. So I had to abandon that, because I needed this area here for the second key light to lift the rest of the room ambient. So that had to go, which was frustrating. So what I need to do in that instance is buy a bigger mirror to cast a bigger light when I'm reflecting. The way that I've done it is that I used this small Ulanzi L1 Pro LED. Now I've seen this on Nigel Barras, I think it's Barras, I'll apologize if I get that wrong. Now this is a single point LED, which is great for casting shadows because it produces a hard light. The only downside is that it's nowhere near as bright as my main key light. So we are gonna run into an issue whereby there's only so much brightness I can get this. Now, just turn this on. So right now, this is single point LED and I won't shine it too much into the camera, but that is, at the back of me is the light that's being cast. Now this is on the first setting and it's got 4 settings. And that is the maximum brightness that you're gonna get with this. So that's something that I had to play with. So we'll set that back to its minimum. Now what I'm gonna do is, we have the Venetian blinds here and I'm just gonna set this up and we're gonna cast those shadows just so you can see the effect that this is giving, not going. Now we're not gonna put this on full brightness because I need this to last the duration of this video, and it's taken me a while to do so far. So literally it's on a magic arm and it's just shining through the Venetian blinds that I've got set up here, and as you can see behind is casting a nice shadow. So you just need to play around with the composition of where the actual Venetian blind is, but that is how I was creating that light against that wall. And what I was doing was I was using a V flat which was going against the side here just to create some nice sharp lines either side so I could control the shape of that Venetian blind. So that was set to its maximum setting. Now obviously I've not done anything with the color temperature, that comes later. What I had to do was try and get the right contrast ratio. So like I said, we had a second key light then that was going to be providing the ambient or the fill for the rest of the room. Because this could only go to a certain brightness, I had to make sure that the light that I was using would go 2 stops under. So this was using a newer LED mat that I purchased recently, and I'm really pleased with it. Actually, it's very lightweight and it is, well, it's so far it's been working out really well. So this was positioned here. Now the problem is that without any diffusion on it, at 10% this was given a contrast ratio greater than this, so that was no good. So I had to chuck a few layers of diffusion in order to get that 1:2 contrast ratio. Now there is a caveat to that and I'll explain that now. So just to explain, there was 3 layers of diffusion and then there was also another layer of diffusion that was on the actual key light itself. So there was 4 layers of diffusion just to get that contrast ratio down. Now when I took a light reading of the main key light, which is the Ulanzi, this was coming in I think at around about 1.4. Now because the lens that I got is 2.2, I needed to get that up. Now the only way that I can do that, I can't raise the light on there because it's already at its maximum. So I was adding an ISO of 200. So in order to get that to 2.2, I had to set that ISO to 640. Now that's not a problem, but in the final image it did introduce a bit of noise and I'm not happy with that, but you're going to get noise regardless, no matter how good your camera is. That's just going to be one of the caveats, and I have managed to get rid of some of the noise and it's using the free version of DaVinci, so we'll show that later. So there we had the contrast ratio because it already had that set. Now by increasing the ISO, what that means is that the contrast ratio is still going to be the same. It just means that the image is just going to get brighter. So that was one hurdle that I tackled. The next one is actual using CTO to get the color temperature of the key light, the Ulanzi, from 5500 down to 3100, and the way that I'd done that was actually using a bit of CTO. that was on the light itself, and we'll check that on now at the moment. So as you can see, that has dropped that color down. Now, in the same method that I did for getting the Kelvin of the early morning, I wanted to make sure that I was getting the right Kelvin for the light. Now that is saying that it's rated at 5500, but when I done it, it was saying that it was rated at 5800. So I set the white balance of the camera to 5800 just to match what that was saying. So don't go by what the manufacturer is saying. Always do your own check just to make sure that it's right, because even on the actual, I think the manual, it says 5500 plus minus 200. So you got that discrepancy. So always check that. I had to check that as well then for the actual newer LED, because this was rated at 5500 or 5600, but the problem was because it's going through 3 or 4 levels of diffusion, there is obviously going to be a color shift in that, or a temperature change. So I turned the key light off and then I did the same thing. Now that was coming in at 5100, so I knew by setting the camera to 5800 that would naturally fetch that back up into a little orange, so they would warm it basically. So I didn't put any CTO on the actual newer LED because it was rated at 5100, and by setting the camera balance at 58 it actually made it a bit warmer, so I didn't have to do anything with that. It was just adding the CTO to fetch that down to 3100. And it's the same effect as if you want to create like moonlight. You basically get your camera or your lighting to say if it's 5500, and then you set the Kelvin to about 3100, and then that changes that light into blue. So it's the same effect as what that's doing. So that is essentially how I created the lighting then for that, and it was just making sure that the composition and everything was right. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about now the actual diffusion that I put on the lens. So there's 2 different types of diffusion, and there's a reason why I done these 2 different types. So on the actual lens itself, you've got the Cinebloom, and that is at 10%. And I purchased this a couple of weeks back, and I've not really had a chance to really get into really testing it. But what I've been doing is, prior to this, is that I've been softening my image a bit in post with using DaVinci Resolve. Sorry, it's late and I'm tired. And I wanted to try and create a more natural, organic look, because that is using a power window, and obviously you're setting the strength, and it wasn't, I was happy with it, but I also felt it wasn't organic enough, and I was trying to take away the digital look. So I thought, let's try it, because obviously it's going to bloom the highlights better, and it's going to do things with colors, like desaturate it a little bit better. So that's what I was after. So that is what is on the lens at the moment. Behind the lens, in a previous video, I've put fishing wire, and that creates a nice streak like you see with the anamorphic lenses. I forgot the bloody name then. And I wanted to try that again, but wasn't happy with how that turned out, because on the lens you can see that it starts off nice and then it fades off. And then I was watching Indy Morgal, and I think it was to do with Haunted House on Haunted Hill, the series that was on Netflix. If you haven't watched it, you should watch it, because that's a fantastic show. But the lighting in that is phenomenal. And one of the things that the director or the cinematographer talked about is, he said about netting on the back of the lens. And I was like, apparently that's been there used for years. It's been like decades old, but it was the first that I'd heard of it. So I did a bit of searching online, and I came across a gentleman. I forgot your name, I'm sorry, but I'll post a link to his website of how he done it. And basically you put netting behind the actual lens, so it sits at the back of the lens, and you can get different type of fabrics, and he was showing different ones with like metallic fabrics and everything. Now that acts as a diffusion as well, so as well as the 10% of the Cinebloom, it's given me an extra diffusion, and the image that you're seeing today is a result of that. So we've got the Cinebloom on the lens, and we've also got the netting at the back. Now the interesting thing is that I put the light there, but earlier I did it. And let's see if I can do this without actually mucking up something. So if I do this, so if I shine the light, if you can see those nice light streaks, and that is as a result of the netting at the back. And I got a lot more to play around with it to see how well it works, but it is really, I'm really digging it. So it's not obviously to be used in every situation, but it gives me the option whereby if I can just use the Cinebloom on its own. But if I want that more stylized look where you've got those reflections, then that's fantastic. Now I've tried two different types. The one in the back is a gold netting, and that is providing this massive light. So that is why you're seeing that streak. Now I'm doing this again for a purpose. I've got another netting then, which is a metallic grey. Now that, where you're seeing the streaks all the way through, on the metallic grey, it comes to about here. So it's nowhere near as dramatic as this. So that is one way. Now, you obviously can see the light streaks in the actual image in that scene because I've deliberately not put any lights directly in for that. But I wanted to show you the method and the reason why I'm trying this is because it's a really interesting look. Obviously it's not for everything, you can't do it for commercial because they like the real clean look, but it's something to bear in mind. Now the second part, so we've talked about the lighting, we've talked about the camera setup. So like I said, the camera was set up at the 6400 ISO, it's 24 frames per second. The lens itself was at t2.2, and yeah, so that was it for that part. Now the second part, or the third part that I've been wanting to try out is actually using the Tilta Nucleus Nano N in conjunction with the Edelkrone Head 1, because what I've been doing is, and what I've been playing with is using this to do focus points. So like we've got here, I've got two focus points set up, and what I've been doing is I've been using this to rack focus. On the day of this shoot, I had 4 points. So right now you can see that there's only 3. Now with the head one on its own, you only get 3. If you use this in conjunction with the slider, you get 6 points. Now if you combine the two, you've got 6 points of focus racking, which is overkill, but it's there. You've got that option. So what I was doing was, the first focus point was the TV. Second focus point was my partner, she was sitting down the sofa. The third focus point was the mug, and then the last movement then was a slow parallax, just going past, and that the focus point was still on my partner. So the way that I wanted the scene is that it's already focused in on the TV. So she walks towards the TV, she picks up the remote, and then she sits down on the chair. So that was focus point 2. So as she got to the actual TV, I pressed the button on the remote to focus then on where she would sit. So as she was sitting down, it was focusing on her. And then when I was ready, I gave her a cue to pick the coffee up, but I had to do it in time. So this takes a little while. So if you want fast focus racking, I would suggest you use the manual method of setting your A to B points, and you can do that much quicker. With this, it's going to take between 3 to 5 seconds, and it really depends on how far the focus points are between each other. So the third point then was, like I said, it was the mug. So I had to do this in advance. So I pressed the button for it to start focusing on the mug, and then after about a second I said for her to pick it up. So she picked it up. Now I needed her to wait a little bit longer, but she came in a little bit quicker. So I had to, as soon as it focused in, I had to press it back. So it is a little bit slow getting back to the focus of her, but it allowed me to set 3 points of focus that I would never normally be able to do on my own, and that's the point. Usually, or 99% of the time, I am filming on my own, and having that option is fantastic because you can actually do a record on how long you set things as well. So whilst it's got a sequencer, it has got the ability to record. So if I know that it's going to take me a couple of seconds, pause at a point, go to another point, and I'll demonstrate that now. So what we've got, I'll show you the rig. Oh. So this is the rig that I've been using, and it is just a little mini tripod on a bracket, and you've got a Magic Arm clamp, again with the remote, and then you've just got the tilter, well not the tilter but the Edelkrone head, and because you are set in the focus point, you are literally turning. So what I'll do is I'll get you here, so obviously you're out of focus, then you can see that turning. There we go, so that's in focus. Now you can see because the throw is quite large, it's taking about 5 or 6 seconds. So if I get that back to me now, and there we go. So it's not amazingly fast, but it gives me a lot of flexibility when it comes to what I want to do. Now I'll just put this back down. Now the key thing with this is I don't have it too close to the microphone because it does make a tiny bit of noise and you will pick it up. Now earlier I was saying you could record this, so if I just do an example, so on here there is a button that says record. So if I press this, you can hear it beeping. So if I press 1, that is my start point and it's beeping faster. So the longer I stay here, it's recording. If I want to do it then, obviously without the focus. So then I'm in focus here. So there, and then forever along. There we are, we're back in focus. Now if I stop that, it now creates a point at which I can play this again. So if we go back, and then it's got the play button, and then it's saying it's 32 seconds long, so I will play that. So literally I will just let it go and do its business, and I'm not touching it. It will keep it as it was. So right now we're on 10 seconds and now it's doing the focus. Now the key thing with this is that you can do it with the slider and the head one and do pan and tilt shots, and it will do it as, obviously I'm in focus here because it's on. It's coming back now, and I'm going to clear and exit that. So that means that I can time stuff. So I can hold this in my hand, I can walk around and do my scene. So the way that I was going to do it was the same way that I'd done it with my partner, but I would have used this feature to do it. It just would have meant I would have had to remember the seconds that it was at each point. So if you're going to do it, try to make it as organic as you can, but it will do it and it enables you to do this on your own. And the next part then we will talk about is the actual editing. So every time I do a video, I use this now, the spider checker, to actually color correct, and that is the first thing that I do. So like I've done with this video, I have created a 10 to 15 second video of me holding this against the key light to make sure that I get everything set, and then it's a case of me going into DaVinci Resolve using that to color correct the image. And then what I've done then is I've just adjusted the primary, so I've got the saturation and the actual contrast to where I want it. There are a few things that I tend to do with the hue versus saturation, the hue versus hue, in order to get the colors right, but I'll explain that in another video. And then I also do a hue versus luminance, because what I find with this particular camera, anything that is a bright blue, and it doesn't do particularly well. So in DaVinci, I've literally got to fetch the saturation of that blue channel down, and I've also got to fetch the luminance down a bit, just so that it doesn't look like it's clipping. And then from there, then it's just me adding 1 or 2 bits of effects. So by the TV, I just made sure that there was a gradient from the TV towards the wall, and I just darkened that up a bit. And then on the opposite side, my partner, where you've got the start of the actual Venetian blind, I created another node with another gradient mask going the opposite way. And what I did with that was I just brightened that up a little bit, and I just increased the contrast up by a bit, I think about between 5 and 10. And then what that did was that just fetched out a bit more saturation in that area. So it just gave a nice contrast between the two. I still had the contrast ratios that I set up, but yeah, it worked out really, really well. And I'm really pleased with the image. I do find it a tiny bit soft, but I really like the quality that's come out of it. So that is it. Yeah, that is pretty much how I done it. I really enjoyed doing it, and it was nice to have someone else in the actual video apart from this mug, because even I get sick of seeing it after a while. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for sticking around this long. If you have, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Yeah, cheers. Thanks.